Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Would you mind just starting off by telling me who you are?
Well, first I'd like to say thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. My name is Brian Howard. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a son. I'm an uncle. I'm a cousin. And I'm an upstanding man and a pillar of my community. But I didn't always start off like that.
Do you mind telling me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Well, I grew up in a two-parent household, mother and father. They separated when I was young. And so what I didn't know then that I know now, how that affected me psychologically. A little boy always wants his father, always wants his mother. And so when they two separated, it kind of had a dramatic effect on me. And so through a babysitter, I got introduced to the streets. Started smoking marijuana, but not really became addicted. That makes sense.
It does.
And so, and this became addictive to the street life. Got introduced to almost every imaginable thing that you can think of. And, just to make a quick, long story quick, wound up committing murder at the age of 17. In and out of DJJ, committed murder at 17 and got sentenced to a natural life sentence, which in terms of numbers, that's 999 years. To serve 20 years to be eligible for parole. Total, I did 28 years and 5 months. For the grace of God, was paroled out a little over 5 years ago. And life is beautiful.
That's great. So it sounds like you definitely got back onto your feet after you were released.
It started before got released. Now, don't get me wrong. In my first couple of years of incarceration, I was continuing doing the activity, engaging in the activities that brought me there in the first place. But it was soon, 3 to 4 years, I started seeing my friends from the same neighborhood that I grew up in coming in the prison as well, right? And then I've learned in order for me to change, I have to change my environment. Now, environment, two things: my environment up here, and then my physical surroundings. So I had the opportunity at that time in the early '90s. You had a little control in South Carolina Department of Corrections of where you want to be housed at. And so they was building new prisons at the time, and I was wanted to go to a new prison further away from my friends so I can start working on myself and changing myself. Stop doing the activities that led me there in the first place. And so with that, as far as education, got kicked out of the 8th grade. So I never went past the 8th grade. Went to Alice Burney in North Charleston. And so being an 8th grade dropout, or 8th grade kick out, I like to say, because I got kicked out. But I come from a family that's educated. My grandmother's a teacher. My father been to college. Aunts and uncles who been to college, educated. So I knew what education had looked like. I just chose a different path. So upon me becoming incarcerated, I knew education was the pathway for me to get out of there. But however, because of the draconian laws or how the penal system is designed today, as it was in the mid 1800s, you had to meet a certain criteria to engage in some of the educational skills classes. For example, you had to be within 2 years of your max out date to participate in learning the skill of carpentry or welding or brake masonry. And so me having a life sentence or other guys that having those length of sentences and don't have no max out dates, only a parole date, you're never eligible to learn a skill.
So even though you could get out on parole in 20 years, I mean, that's
Right.
not that long, right? But especially
it's long.
considering, I mean, especially considering you were locked up or going to be locked up for 999.
Right.
In the grand
In
scheme of things,
comparison.
it's not that long. You still were not able to participate in those kinds of educational classes.
Right. And so because I knew how to manipulate and scheme, all skills that I learned from street life, I was able to manipulate myself into some of those classes. Become HVAC certified, my carpentry certification, and certain computer skills and things of that nature. But a lot, 95% of the people in there that have those type of sentences don't get that opportunity to do so. So that's counter-rehabilitated, you know?
But it seems like that rehabilitation isn't open for everyone. It actually seems like it's only open to a small portion of people.
And, right, but rehabilitation is just a word, right? And hopefully later, a little later on, we can get more deeper into that aspect.
Sure.
So I immediately got my GED. Back then, which they don't have now, we was afforded to go to college because we was eligible for Pell Grants. And so depending on what institution that you was at, Libra, at the time it was Baptist College, now it's Charleston Southern University, would come in and held classes, 100, 200 level classes, so they can get a group of people to go to 300 and 400 level classes. The institution that I transferred, Lee Correctional Institution, the University of South Carolina, Sumter campus, had did that institution. So whatever institution you was at, the nearest college would likely take on that institution. And so enrolled in college, got 2 years in. Bill Clinton, an elected president, he cuts the Pell Grants out for prisoners. So now there's no money left to help rehabilitate through education. And all studies have shown that if you educate yourself, get an education, you have lessened your chances of to recidivate back into prison. But they took that out. Make you wonder.
Definitely.
And
So you think that President Clinton back then cutting that program out, obviously it did a disservice to everyone who was incarcerated. Do you think now, if that program was reintroduced, it would help decrease recidivism?
definitely that, and then you gotta. It's not no one quick fix. The system is so broken, and I don't want to sound like I'm bashing, because we got to have some kind of system to incarcerate those who don't want to follow the rules of our society. That helps keep society safe. However, 96, 97, a high percentage of people that go in are coming out. So the question is, do you want a better person coming out of prison, or a person who is worse or still continuing to do the same behavior that landed them in the prison in the first place. Well, now that I'm a tax-paying citizen, I want a better person coming out into my community because I have a daughter, I have a grandson, I have a son-in-law, I have a wife, I have a mother, I have a father, I have cousins that live in the community. And I want to be able to have a safe environment for them to live in. And so I have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to create that.
You mentioned that rehabilitation is just a word. In your perspective, what do you think are some different forms of rehabilitation that we can implement into the criminal justice system so we can decrease recidivism?
So before I do that, I pulled it up because I don't want to misquote it, right? I want people to look and see, right? Whatever prison reform that we do, if we don't address this particular issue, we only putting a Band-Aid on the problem. And the issue is the 13th Amendment, which says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment of a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So from the start, the foundation is punitive. There's no mention of rehabilitation in that constitutional amendment. So wherever prison reform that we push for, any programs we push for, if the foundation or the basis doesn't change, we're only putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and the sore only gets worse as time goes on. But we have to do something, right? While I was in prison, I would say maybe about the last 10 years or so of my incarceration, I was given the honor and the privilege to help develop character programs. We started at Allendale Correctional Institution, and that became the character institution for the state of South Carolina. I have a video of it on my YouTube channel called Man to Man, where the warden at the time had this vision of creating better people or creating a better environment to allow people to better themselves because he knew they were getting out one day. And so we developed this character program that was based upon 10 self-respect-based rules, right? Rule number 1 was the noise level. So you have to understand in prison, every imaginable thing goes on in prison. Every imaginable person is in prison, from college professors to whom we deem as the lowest person in our society. So we have a broad spectrum of people that's in the Department of Corrections, all huddled together. And so having this privilege to create these programs that's based on respect-based rules, one of them is controlling the noise level. And what that looks like is, if we in the common area and we engaging in a conversation, and this fella was 8 feet away and he could clearly hear our conversation, we're being too loud. And so we had a method on how to decrease the noise level. Once everybody in that dorm felt like the noise level was too high, we would simply just raise our hand collectively communicating to everyone that the noise level is too loud and to bring it down. Actually, to cease talking and then resume back at a lower level.
That list, it seemed to prove very effective in your case. Obviously, other jails and prisons don't use that list. But again, I ask you, if they did, do you think that people, when they got out of jail or prison, they would have an easier time following the rules in society?
Not on the surface.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, it takes one of the key components to those programs is peer-to-peer accountability. Right? I'm accountable to my other peers, and my peers are accountable to me. Right? And so you cannot have programs that serve as a dictatorship from the top down. Measurable change always starts from inside out. They have to start with the people that's already inside to hold themselves accountable and everybody else. So peer-to-peer accountability is one key component that any program has to have. Mentorship. People who are willing to serve as volunteers from the outside, from the community, to come in and teach, share, mentor their skill levels to other guys. We had a volunteer came in and asked the warden a question. He said, what percentage do you think of guys that's in prison are good people and just made a mistake? The warden said 95%. The volunteer was shocked that it was that high of a number of relatively good people just made bad choices and ended up in prison, right? And so 95% of the people get out. So that it always brings us back to that question: do you want a person who's been incarcerated to come out better, the same, or worse? I want them better.
And it's interesting too, because 95%, that's a big percentage, but the recidivism rates are very high. So even in that 95% category of good people, some of them, most of them, are still ending up back in jail.
Right. Because it takes there's an African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, right? It takes a community to mentor a formerly incarcerated person, right? You know, that's one thing that we're trying to change the narrative of calling people who have been incarcerated inmates, ex-cons, people with felonies, you know, to formerly incarcerated people, right? Because we're people too. And so having said that, it takes a community to get involved. You can't, guys who get out find it hard to find gainful employment. You can get a job, $12 an hour. I mean, that's something you might have to start with, but how you can raise a family. Because remember now, I was 17 years old going into prison, right? Started early, so I had a child. But most people who are incarcerated have wife and kids, been in the military, have gone to college, was living a productive life, and just made some bad choices. Some things happened in their life, made some bad choices, and ended up in prison. And so coming back with that, having to check that box, have you been convicted of a felony? In some respect, Why does that matter? Now, that's not something across the board because we can understand that I don't want a sex offender who messes with children to work at an elementary school. No. We could see if somebody who have a history of robbing banks, we don't want to be employed at a bank. Some practical things like that.
Right.
But don't deny a person of productive employment, a living wage, based upon he has a felony.
When you re-entered society after you were released, how hard was it for you to find a job and just to get reestablished in life?
So here's the thing, that because I was a leader on the inside in creating these programs, I became resourceful, meaning a lot of volunteers, networking, developing programs. So we have two programs that are now currently in SCDC. One is called Jumpstart, is a prison reentry program that's based in Spartanburg, and another one called Fresh Start that's based right here in Charleston, prison reentry program. And both of them go in and teach approximately 40-week curriculums based on character that guys go through, that I went through, end up facilitating for many years, go through these classes for a year, graduate, and have the ability to have transitional housing and job opportunity coming out because they have transitional houses. So I use that resource. Because there's two little programs, obviously they can't get everybody, right? So only a small percentage of guys come through there, and they have really low percentage of recidivism of guys going there. I want to say it's like 4%. So having programs like that for guys to come out, be in transitional housing, getting assigned a mentor, having employers already there ready to employ them till they get on their feet for 6 months or 12 months, however long they sign up to be there, and then go back to their communities, they coming back to add something and not be a bill to their community or family.
I think it's safe to say that you are in the vast minority of people who seek out leadership opportunities while incarcerated and really network yourself. So what do you think makes you different from the other people who just kind of sit in prison and think, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get out here, and just kind of feel helpless?
I don't think I'm no different, right? I was just blessed and fortunate to be able to use the resources that was at my disposal. The reason why I say I don't think I'm no different, man, I've met some of the brilliant people that are in prison. I'm talking about artists, songwriters, singers, actors, brilliant legal minds, carpenters, welders, you name it, right? Some of the most brilliant people, many guys that I know that wrote books, author of books. And so I'm no different from nobody. The thing that might separate me from them, because I was focused and determined to get out of prison and stay out. If you want to put any type of separation, that would be it. But I don't think I'm no different from nobody else.
There's that saying that everyone is good at something. And it sounds like a lot of people in prison are good at least one thing. It just seems like they need assistance from the community, like you were talking about earlier, tapping into that talent. So, would you agree that creating programs like the two that you were talking about would help people not only find a job, but also find a hobby to keep them out of trouble?
Uh, yeah, definitely. But the core thing of it is a lot of people come from broken homes. Even though they're good people, they're broken inside. So it goes back, hurt people, right? So truly, uh, guys have to learn how to believe in themselves, right? Be able to have a vision for themselves that they want better for themselves, right? We can create all the wonderful programs on paper, slam shot, but if the individual don't want to take initiative to look at himself in a better light, right, it won't get done. And sometimes that's hard to do when you have powers that be that don't help shape the environment to make that. Because you have to cultivate the environment to produce certain results. I can't plant tomato plants and don't cultivate the soil that is conducive to flourish tomato plants, right? I'll cultivate the soil that's good for uh, plants that don't need so much nutritional value for it to grow. How a tomato plant gonna thrive in that? So we have to create environments and put ingredients in there for people to thrive. The people that want to see themselves in a better situation. You know, one of the things that guys used to tell me, and I was like baffled at that, man, this is prison. Okay, what does that mean? You know, so we all have this idea of prison is where all the bad people go. So prison's supposed to be this, that, and the third, right? Who said that? How did it get to be like that? Going back to that 13th Amendment, you know, punitive. They're not human. They deserve what they get because they committed a crime against somebody's property or person.
Speaking of environments and kind of straying from the topic of programs, what about the living conditions inside of prisons? Do you think that contributes at all to just how people get out of prison and just have such psychological and sometimes physical issues?
Yes, I mean, if you you live in an environment that's paint is peeling, bugs, running water smells, toilets not working, that plays a lot on your psyche. How can you feel good about yourself if you live in environments that don't communicate that language to you? Because we're human beings, we're social beings, so that we social beings, right? And so people can say what they want to say. If you have dirty clothes on, raggy holes in your shoes, you're going to feel one type of way. That same person, you clean them up, put them in a suit, tie, nice shoes, haircut, he begins to behave differently because he feels differently. Psychological,
When you look good, you feel good.
of course. And so all these are contributing factors to why we have so many people in prison today.
A lot of people from political figures to professors to authors, anyone in between, they always write about what they believe could change the criminal justice system. But do you believe that your insight of how it works from spending time in prison is beneficial because those people, they haven't seen what's inside?
Not only is it beneficial, it's needed, right? Formerly incarcerated people have to sit at the table when you're talking about prison reform. Change starts from inside out. Who better knows? I'll give you an example. You got a car, Chevrolet. You don't go take your car to the BMW dealership to get it fixed. You take it to the people who certify in that particular model, right? And so anything that you want to fix, you go to the person who has the most experience. Now, having said that, it takes a combination of both the lawmakers, the psychiatrists, the formerly incarcerated people to come to the table together and find solutions. So, the question is, why isn't it being done? It's being done on a small scale, right? But why is not being done on a large scale? Tell you why. Prisons are big business. If you have institutions that have stockholders, right? I'll give you an example. Years ago when they built the Charleston County Jail, right? They built this big old jail, I think hold like 3,000 something people, right? People had invested in that. So when you invest in something, as an investor, I want a return on my investment. And so when we talking about jails and prisons, how do you get a return on your investment? By filling in the beds. So you have all kind of companies that are invested in prison. You have what they call a canteen, a store within the prison that sell different food products, name food products. All of those companies have invested product in the prison. So if you passing prison legislation that will significantly decrease the prison population by 60%, you think people who are invested in making money off of that will support that bill? No. Because that would be a bad return on their investment. And then we talking about human life.
Is there anything I missed that you want me to cover?
I mean, this topic is so vast.
I know.
Right? It can't be captured, in one sitting, right? So, but I think this is a good start to at least create the dialogue. And again, I would like to thank y'all for inviting me to sit at the table to discuss these issues. And I'm a stickler on that 13th Amendment, right? You can't, because you drafting up prison reform legislation with the best intentions to create something good, all right? That legislation can't go against the Constitution. It can't implement something that will become law if it goes against our Constitution. And so that has to change. The 13th Amendment has to change to be able to project rehabilitation, and in some cases, habilitation.
So I think, a lot of people could say, well, he brought up so many good points about what needs to change, but where do we start? Is it safe to say that the 13th Amendment and fixing that language in it is where we begin and really changing the criminal justice system?
I think so. Because if last analogy, I have my home, my house, and I've noticed cracks are becoming in the walls, right? I can go fix those cracks. As time progresses, more cracks gonna come. I can keep fixing, patching up them cracks, but time gonna progress, still gonna bring cracks. Why? Because there's something wrong with my foundation. That's what makes the cracks in your wall. So until I fix the foundation to my house, that's when I'll fix the cracks in my wall. And so until we truly fix our institution that houses people who commit crimes in our society, because we can't keep calling it a criminal justice system. Just the name of alone, brings criminality, right? And so, and take a holistic approach that we start healing the whole person, right? And then things will start changing. So truthfully, go back, right? 13th Amendment and helping the individuals that's incarcerated change. Gandhi say, be the change you want to see in the world. Everything always starts with us.
Well, thank you very much for coming here, and you brought up a lot of great insight and used some really good analogies that I think will definitely help people see that change needs to come.
And I thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
Appreciate it, and I hope this is helpful.
It is. Thank you very much.
All right.